Xavier's Gentlemen's Club New Year's Eve Extravaganza, Episode 1, December 24th, 1 week before disaster by Rich von Halt. The darkness was absolute, broken only by stark white letters that seemed to float in the void. December 31st, New Year's Eve. Somewhere in that blackness, voices rose in unison, a crowd counting down the final moments of the year with anticipation crackling through their words. 10, they shouted, their voices merging into one powerful declaration. A heartbeat passed. 9. Another beat, heavy with expectation. 8. The countdown continued, each number dropping like a stone into still water, sending ripples of excitement through the unseen gathering. 7. 6. 5. The tension was palpable now, building with each decreasing digit. 4. 3. 2. 1. And then erupting like a dam bursting. Happy New Year. The Gentlemen's Club pulsed with life and celebration, bodies pressed together in joyful embraces, lips meeting lips, as couples kissed away the old year and welcomed the new. Arms wrapped around shoulders and waists as friends hugged with abandon, their faces flushed with alcohol and happiness. Champagne corks flew through the air like tiny missiles of celebration, each pop accompanied by cheers and laughter. The golden liquid foamed and spilled, splashing onto the floor where feet shuffled and stomped in rhythmic celebration. The dance floor was a sea of moving bodies, swaying and grinding to the pounding beat that vibrated through the walls and floor. A group of performers had claimed the stage, their voices rising above the crowd noise as they launched into a dance remix of Auld Lang Syne. The familiar melody was almost unrecognizable under layers of electronic beats and synthesized harmonies. But it didn't matter. Everyone knew the words, and voices joined together in drunken, joyful chorus. Every face in the crowd was lit with pure happiness, eyes bright with tears of joy and alcohol, smiles stretched wide across flushed cheeks. This was the moment when anything seemed possible, when the slate was wiped clean and the future stretched ahead full of promise. Then came the gunshots. The sounds cracked through the air like thunder, cutting through the music and laughter with brutal efficiency. The celebration died instantly, replaced by something primal and terrifying. Screams erupted from every throat. The joyful crowd transformed into a panicked mob, bodies crashing into each other as everyone tried to reach the exits at once. Some people dropped to the floor, covering their heads with their hands and making themselves as small as possible. Others stumbled and fell, knocked down by the surge of fleeing bodies and began to sob uncontrollably where they lay. The performers on stage scattered like startled birds, abandoning their instruments and microphones as they dove for cover behind speakers and equipment. In moments, the scene of perfect celebration had become one of perfect chaos. 7 days earlier, on December 24th, the words, "1 week before disaster," hung in the darkness like a prophecy. The mechanic shop was filled with the twangy sounds of Garth Brooks crooning about friends in low places, the music mixing with the industrial symphony of tools clanging, engines running, and compressed air hissing. The smell of motor oil, gasoline, and hot metal hung heavy in the air, creating an atmosphere that was both comforting and harsh. Wade Garrick lay on his back beneath a 1964 Pontiac GTO, his legs sticking out from under the classic muscle car. In his early 30s, he was a little taller than average when standing, but right now he was flat on his back on a creeper, his dirty curly brown hair matted with sweat, and his patchy facial hair catching droplets of perspiration. His clothes were stained with various automotive fluids, and his hands were black with grease and grime. He sang along with the radio, his voice echoing off the undercarriage of the car. "Yeah, I've got friends in low places where the whiskey drowns, and the beer chases my blues away." The wrench in his hand slipped suddenly, and a stream of hot oil poured directly onto his face, coating his features in black liquid. "Ah, fuck." Wade's voice was muffled and angry, oil dripping from his lips as he spoke. Dusty, Wade's co-worker, came rushing over at the sound of distress. He was a portly man stuffed into a blue mechanic's uniform that had seen better days, his backwards baseball cap secured with a chin strap that framed his scraggly facial hair. His belly strained against the fabric of his shirt, and his boots were as oil-stained as Wade's. "Wade, you all right?" Dusty asked. though his tone suggested he was more amused than concerned. Wade slid out from underneath the car on his creeper, his face completely covered in black oil. His eyes were squeezed shut, and oil dripped steadily from his chin onto his already stained shirt. "Does it look like I'm fucking all right?" Wade's voice was furious, his frustration evident even with his eyes closed and oil coating his mouth. Dusty couldn't help himself and burst into laughter, his belly shaking with mirth. "No, I just wanted to see the look on your face." Wade held out his hand blindly, searching for help. "Will you hand me a rag?" Dusty spotted a dirty rag lying on the tool table nearby and grabbed it. Instead of placing it gently in Wade's outstretched hand, he threw it directly at Wade's oil-covered face. "Fuck, man." Wade's voice was a mixture of anger and resignation. Dusty's laughter echoed through the shop as Wade grabbed the rag and began wiping the oil from his face, spitting the bitter taste of motor oil onto the concrete floor. In the small bathroom at the back of the shop, Wade stood at the sink, scrubbing his face with industrial hand soap. The water ran black as it carried away layers of oil and grime. Dusty leaned against the doorframe, still chuckling to himself about the incident. "You going to the club tonight?" Dusty asked, his tone casual but with an underlying current of interest. Wade continued scrubbing his face, not looking up from the sink. "What do you think?" Dusty laughed again, shaking his head. "Oh man, I wish I had your life." Wade finally looked up, meeting Dusty's eyes in the mirror. "Why, man?" Dusty's expression was completely serious despite his earlier laughter. "I love titties." The phone in the front office began ringing, its shrill tone cutting through their conversation. Both men looked toward the sound, then back at each other. "Go get it, Dusty," Wade said, returning his attention to cleaning his face. "Shut up," Dusty replied, but he was already walking away from the bathroom. As he headed toward the front office, Dusty began singing along with the radio again, his voice carrying back to the bathroom. "I got friends." The ringing stopped, followed by Dusty's voice. "Hello?" Wade looked at himself in the cracked mirror above the sink. His face was as clean as it was going to get, though the edges around his hairline and jaw were still stained with oil that would probably take days to completely fade. His curly brown hair was damp from the washing, and his patchy beard looked even more unkempt than usual. From the front office came Dusty's voice again. "Okay, we'll be here. Bye-bye." The phone clicked as Dusty hung up, immediately followed by his enthusiastic shout, "I love titties." Wade shook his head and muttered to himself, "Yeah, but I bet you wish your girl wasn't a stripper." Dusty's head appeared in the bathroom doorway again, his backwards cap slightly askew. "Hey, Wade, you have a visitor." Wade walked into the front office, wiping his still damp hands on his already stained shirt. Through the glass window that separated the office from the outside world, he could see two 16-year-old boys standing in the afternoon sunlight. The first boy, Johnny, wore a backwards blue baseball cap that matched his oversized white t-shirt and blue basketball shorts. Everything about his appearance screamed teenager, from his slightly awkward posture to the way he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. The second boy was a stark contrast. Goldie wore baggy jeans that hung low on his hips and a striped polo shirt that looked like it had been borrowed from someone's dad. His blonde hair was heavily gelled and combed back, creating a slick, almost unnatural-looking style that caught the light streaming through the window. Wade opened the door and stepped outside into the warm afternoon air. The smell of hot asphalt and car exhaust mixed with the lingering scent of motor oil that clung to his clothes. "Hey, Wade," Johnny said, his voice carrying the casual familiarity of someone who'd done this before. "Hey, Johnny," Wade replied, then turned his attention to the unfamiliar face. His expression showed confusion mixed with mild suspicion. "Who's this?" Wade asked, nodding toward Goldie. "This is Goldie," Johnny answered, as if that explained everything. Goldie stepped forward slightly, trying to project confidence. "What's up?" Wade studied the boy's appearance, particularly his hair. "Goldie? That your real name?" "No," Goldie replied, then after a beat of hesitation added, "It's 'cause of my hair." He pointed to his golden locks, the gel making them shine almost unnaturally in the sunlight. Wade nodded, filing away this information, then turned back to Johnny. Okay, Johnny, what are we thinking? Dime bag? Johnny's question carried the tentative hope of someone who wasn't sure they could afford what they wanted. Wade's expression showed mild disappointment, like a salesman who knew he could convince his customers to spend more. Come on, boys, don't you want to get lit? Johnny's shoulders sagged slightly. Yeah, but we don't have that much money? Wade's tone shifted to something more businesslike. How much you got? Goldie immediately reached into his pockets, digging around for loose bills and change. He pulled out a crumpled collection of small bills and coins, counting them quickly in his palm. $13, he announced, holding up the money as if it were a significant sum. Wade considered this for a moment, then nodded. All right, give me what you got. Goldie handed over the $13 and Wade counted it carefully, making sure the amount was correct before pocketing the money. Wait here, boys, Wade said, then headed back into the shop. In the storage room at the back of the shop, Wade knelt down beside his backpack, which was tucked behind boxes of car parts and cleaning supplies. He unzipped it and reached inside, pulling out 2 small plastic bags containing marijuana. Each bag held about what someone might expect for a dime bag, enough for a few joints, but nothing extravagant. Wade opened both bags and began picking out the larger, better quality buds, leaving behind the stems, seeds, and smaller pieces. He worked quickly but carefully, making sure to remove the best parts of what he was selling. Dusty appeared in the doorway, his curiosity getting the better of him. Wade, what you doing? Wade didn't look up from his work. Just hooking these boys up. He continued picking through the bags, removing choice pieces and setting them aside. The bags were noticeably lighter when he finished. Dusty watched the process with knowing eyes. Looks like you're skimming off the top. Wade looked up and laughed, neither confirming nor denying the accusation. Back outside, Wade approached the 2 teenagers, who had been waiting patiently in the afternoon heat. He handed Johnny the 2 dime bags, which now contained less marijuana than they had when he'd first pulled them from his backpack. Here you go, Wade said, his tone friendly and businesslike. Both boys responded with genuine gratitude. Thanks, Wade. They turned to leave, already discussing plans for their purchase in hushed, excited tones. See ya, Wade called after them as they walked away. Dusty poked his head out of the shop, having watched the entire transaction from inside. You cold Wade? Wade turned around, genuinely confused by the comment. What? Dusty's expression was serious now, his earlier amusement replaced by something that might have been disapproval. They're kids, Wade. Wade shrugged, as if this observation was irrelevant to the situation. They only had $13. The statement hung in the air between them, a justification that somehow made the situation both better and worse at the same time. The trailer that Wade and Kitty called home was a study in contrasts, shabby around the edges but dressed up for the holidays. Christmas decorations covered nearly every surface, garland draped along the walls and door frames like green tinsel waterfalls. In the corner stood a 4-foot Christmas tree, its lights flickering intermittently between working bulbs and dead ones, creating an uneven pattern of multicolored illumination that somehow made the modest space feel both festive and sad. The sound of running water and Carrie Underwood's voice echoed from the bathroom, where Kitty could be heard singing along with passionate conviction. I dug my keys into the sides of his pretty little souped-up 4-wheel drive, carved my name into his leather seats. Her voice carried the kind of raw emotion that suggested she'd lived every word of the song, even if only in her imagination. The corded phone on the end table next to their worn sofa began ringing, its shrill tone cutting through the music and shower noise. The phone was an old model, the kind with an actual cord that stretched and coiled, a relic from a time when communication required being tethered to one spot. Kitty, in her early 30s with long curly hair that reached past her shoulders, came running out of the bathroom in nothing but a towel. Water dripped from her hair onto the carpeted floor as her feet barely stayed in her slippers, which were too big and threatened to slip off with each hurried step. Her hair was soaking wet, sending streams of water down her body and darkening the towel wrapped around her. She grabbed the phone breathlessly. Hello? The voice on the other end was matter of fact, with the practiced patience of someone who had made this type of call many times before. "Catherine, I know it's Christmas Eve, but we still haven't received rent for this month." Kitty's face immediately shifted from casual greeting to confusion and concern. "What?" "Yeah, we called a few times," the landlord continued, his tone suggesting this wasn't news to him. Kitty's mind raced, trying to process this information while still dripping wet and barely dressed. "We've been working, keeping busy." "I don't want to do this, but if I don't have it by the 1st, I'm going to have to evict you," the landlord said, and his voice carried the weight of someone who really didn't want to be making this call on Christmas Eve. Panic crept into Kitty's voice. "No, we have it. Let me ask Wade." "We'll need the money for January, too," the landlord added, making the situation even worse. Kitty's grip tightened on the phone. "I'll get it from Wade." "Merry Christmas, Catherine," the landlord said, his tone carrying genuine regret. "Merry Christmas," Kitty replied automatically, though there was nothing merry about the conversation they'd just had. She hung up the phone and immediately let out a frustrated curse. "Fuck." At that exact moment, the front door opened, and Wade walked in carrying a greasy paper bag that smelled of fast food. He was already eating French fries directly from the bag, his fingers shiny with salt and grease. His work clothes were still stained from the day at the shop, and he looked tired but satisfied, like someone who just finished a decent day's work. "Hey, you fuck!" Kitty's greeting was immediate and hostile. Wade looked up from his fries with mild amusement. "Hello to you too, honey." "You didn't pay the rent," Kitty said, her voice sharp with accusation. Wade's chewing slowed as he processed what she'd said. "Huh?" "Wade." Her voice rose with exasperation. Wade swallowed his fries and nodded slowly. "Yeah, about that." "She just called. Are you going to have both months next month?" Kitty's question carried the desperation of someone whose living situation was about to become very precarious. "Both?" Wade seemed genuinely confused, as if the concept of owing 2 months' rent was a surprise to him. "She's going to evict us, Wade," Kitty said, her voice mixing anger with genuine fear. Wade's tone was casual, almost dismissive. "I'll have it." "What happened with December's money?" Kitty demanded. Wade took another French fry, chewing thoughtfully before answering. "I bought that fancy dinner stuff." Kitty's eyes widened with disbelief. "You mean Thanksgiving?" She bent down, pulled off one of her oversized slippers, and threw it directly at him. The slipper hit him in the chest and fell to the floor. "What are you eating?" she asked, noticing the bag for the first time. Wade looked at her standing there in just a towel, hair dripping, face flushed with anger, and recognized the signs. "You're hangry, aren't you?" The interior of Wade's white 1994 Chevrolet S10 pickup truck was a cramped space that smelled of cigarettes, motor oil, and now fast food. Kitty sat in the passenger seat, now fully dressed in a tight blue and black dress that hugged her curves, her makeup perfectly applied despite the earlier chaos. She held a burger in her hands, trying to eat while Wade drove like a maniac through traffic. Wade had a cigarette dangling from his lips, one hand on the steering wheel and the other gesturing as he talked. The truck swerved slightly with each movement, weaving between lanes as if the road belonged to him alone. A piece of tomato fell from Kitty's burger and landed directly on her lap, leaving a wet spot on her dress. "Ugh, drive slower, Wade. You're getting me dirty," she complained, picking up the tomato slice with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. She threw the tomato at Wade, hitting him in the shoulder. "Fuck, cat," Wade said, picking up the tomato and immediately throwing it out his open window without slowing down. Kitty grabbed a napkin and began wiping at the spot on her dress, trying to prevent it from staining. "Damn you, Wade, I got mayonnaise on me." Wade glanced over at her, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "It's not the first time you got something white on you." Kitty shot him a disgusted look. "Don't be a pig, Wade." Wade laughed at his own joke, the sound mixing with the engine noise and the rush of air through the open windows. Without warning, he cranked the steering wheel hard to the right, turning into the strip club parking lot like he was being chased. The truck's tires squealed against the asphalt as he slammed on the brakes, bringing them to an abrupt stop in a parking space. The sudden stop sent Kitty jerking forward against her seatbelt, her burger nearly flying out of her hands. "Asshole," she muttered, regaining her composure. Wade put the truck in park and turned off the engine. "Time for work." Kitty rolled her eyes and mimicked his tone with exaggerated seriousness. "Time for work." She balled up her hamburger wrapper, which was now stained with ketchup and mayonnaise, and tossed it directly at Wade. The wrapper hit him in the chest, leaving a white streak of mayonnaise on his pants. "Now you got white stuff on your pants," Kitty said with satisfaction. Wade looked down at the stain and made an exaggerated ha-ha face, as if her comeback was amusing but predictable. Kitty opened the passenger door and stepped out into the parking lot, leaving Wade to deal with the mess she'd made of his clothes. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Kitty walked away from the truck, her movements deliberate and graceful despite the chaos of the ride. She moved as if the world had slowed down around her, each step calculated and purposeful. Her hand smoothed down the bottom of her tight dress, adjusting it to ensure everything was in place after the wild car ride. As she approached the building, the neon sign came into view, revealing the establishment's name in bold letters, Xavier's Gentlemen's Club. Below it, in smaller flickering neon text that buzzed and sputtered intermittently, the words New Year's Eve Extravaganza promised the kind of celebration that would draw crowds willing to spend money. Kitty climbed a small flight of concrete stairs leading to the entrance, where a mountain of a man stood guard. T was an imposing figure, at 6 feet 6 inches and 320 pounds. His massive frame filling out a tight black t-shirt that stretched across his chest and shoulders. His black slacks and black boots completed the uniform look, while thick black sunglasses hid his eyes despite the fact that they were no longer in direct sunlight. His face was clean-shaven, giving him a professional appearance that somehow made him even more intimidating. A clipboard hung from his massive hand like a child's toy. "Hey, T, how we looking?" Kitty asked, her tone friendly and familiar. T's stern expression softened slightly at the sight of her. "Better now that you're here." He opened the heavy door for her with the gallantry of a gentleman. Despite his intimidating appearance, Kitty stood on her tiptoes and planted a quick kiss on his cheek, a gesture of affection that seemed to please the giant man. As she disappeared inside the club, T turned his attention to Wade, who was still sitting in the truck. T gave him a respectful nod, the kind of acknowledgement that passed between men who understood each other's roles. Wade lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and waved back at T before settling in to wait. Inside the Gentlemen's Club, the atmosphere was electric with pre-opening preparation. Xavier, the club's owner, moved through the space like a man possessed. In his early 40s, he was of average height with a slim build that suggested he spent more time managing than relaxing. His short, curly black hair was perfectly styled, and he wore a beautiful white dress shirt decorated with blue polka dots, tucked neatly into navy dress pants. Everything about his appearance suggested attention to detail and pride in presentation. He moved frantically through every inch of the club, checking and double-checking every detail. His route took him first to the entrance, where he tested the doors to ensure they were unlocked and ready for customers. He nodded to several bodyguards positioned throughout the club, each one acknowledging his presence with professional respect. From the entrance, he moved to a mini register station, then grabbed a roller vacuum that sat nearby. The main floor was dominated by a giant circular stage that commanded attention from every angle. Tables surrounded the stage in concentric circles, giving customers various price points and viewing angles. To the left of the main stage were reserved booths, clearly marked for VIP customers willing to pay premium prices. Between these booths and the stage sat the DJ's elevated platform, equipped with professional sound equipment and lighting controls. About 15 feet back from the main stage, more tables filled the space, and to the left of those tables stretched an impressive 25-foot bar that gleamed under the overhead lights. Just to the right of the bar, two metal doors led into the kitchen, while behind the tables near the bar area sat a smaller secondary stage. Next to this smaller stage were intimate booths, designed for more private entertainment. Xavier's inspection continued as he pushed through the silver metal doors into the kitchen. His forehead was already covered with a thin sheen of sweat, evidence of his nervous energy and the pressure he felt to ensure everything was perfect. "How we looking? How we looking, chef?" he called out as he entered. The kitchen was alive with activity. All the cooks were positioned at their stations on the line, pre-cooking items and preparing for the evening rush. The smell of grilled meat and seasoned vegetables filled the air, mixing with the industrial sounds of commercial cooking equipment. Xavier approached the cook working the grill, a man whose focus never wavered from the food in front of him. "Where's Bobby?" Xavier asked. Cook Thomas, without looking up from his work, pointed toward the walk-in refrigerator. Xavier's expression shifted to concern as he walked toward the large metal door. He opened the refrigerator, and light from the kitchen flooded into the cold storage space. In the back corner, crouched down with her face buried in her arms, sat Bobby. She was in her mid to late 20s, with short, shaggy, dirty blonde hair pulled back by a black headband. Her posture suggested someone trying to make herself as small as possible. "Bobby, how we looking?" Xavier asked, his voice gentler now. She lifted her head, revealing a face streaked with mascara that had run from crying. Her eyes were bloodshot and puffy, the kind of red that comes from sustained emotional distress. "Fuck," Xavier muttered quietly to himself, recognizing that this was more than just pre-shift nerves. He stepped into the cold refrigerator and walked toward her, kneeling down to her level. From his pocket, he produced some tissues and offered them to her. "Thank you," Bobby said, her voice thick with emotion. "What's the matter?" Xavier asked, his tone mixing genuine concern with the urgency of someone who needed his staff functional. "My boyfriend's cheating on me," Bobby replied, the words carrying the weight of fresh betrayal. Xavier's expression showed sympathy, but also the practical concern of a business owner facing a busy night. "Oh, I'm sorry, but I need you today. If we can just get through today and tomorrow, I promise you I'll give you some time off so you can figure things out." "Yes?" Bobby looked up at him, and he could see she was struggling to compose herself. "There's one more thing." Xavier waited, sensing that whatever was coming would make his day even more complicated. Bobby began crying harder, her voice breaking as she delivered the news. "The fillets never came in." "Fuck," Xavier said, his voice carrying the weight of a man whose carefully planned evening was falling apart. Xavier emerged from the kitchen and moved behind the bar, his frustration evident in every movement. He began rearranging alcohol bottles with sharp, aggressive motions, trying to channel his anxiety into productive activity. Mixie, the head bartender, worked on the opposite side of the bar. She was in her mid-20s with messy, dirty blonde hair that looked deliberately styled to appear casual. Her black low-cut tank top revealed enough to suggest she understood the visual requirements of her job while still maintaining professionalism. "Xavier, I'm setting those up next. Just waiting for the shipment to arrive," Mixie said, noticing his frantic bottle rearrangement. Xavier didn't slow down his work. "Did the Mucow vanilla come in?" Mixie made a face of disgust. Yeah, it's under the sink." Xavier bent down and discovered several crates stored beneath the bar. He began loading them onto a nearby dolly with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "Why do you order that crap? No one drinks it," Mixie asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Xavier straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We have a very small clientele who likes it." Mixie shrugged, clearly not understanding the business logic. "Why don't you leave that here?" Xavier's response carried the weight of someone who took personal responsibility for every detail. "I like to deliver this firsthand." "Okay," Mixie replied, returning her attention to her own preparations as Xavier wheeled the dolly toward the exit. Xavier's office was a cramped space that served as both sanctuary and command center for the club's operations. He frantically opened the door, maneuvering the dolly inside before shutting the door behind him with the urgency of someone who needed complete privacy. He went through each crate methodically, his movements quick but careful. Popping open the first lid, he removed several bottles of the expensive cognac, setting them aside on his desk. Then he reached deeper into the crate and pulled out a half-gallon blue package. Inside this innocuous-looking container was a plastic bag filled halfway with white powder, cocaine. Xavier unrolled the bag and opened it, the familiar ritual of someone who had done this many times before. He dipped his finger into the powder and rubbed it around his gums, testing the quality with the practiced expertise of both user and dealer. A sharp knock at the door interrupted his inspection. Panic flashed across his face as he frantically rolled up the bag and shoved it back into the crate, then grabbed the lid and pressed it back into place, trying to make everything look normal. "Come in," he called out, his voice slightly strained from the rush of adrenaline. Kitty entered the office, her expression hopeful but tentative. "Hey, you have a minute?" Xavier was already grabbing the crate, his mind still racing from the close call. "Not really." He lifted the box and headed toward the door, clearly intending to end the conversation before it started. In the back hallway, Kitty hurried after him, her heels clicking against the floor as she struggled to keep up with his determined pace. "Wait," she called out. Xavier didn't slow down, his frustration evident in every step. "Catherine, I'm extremely busy. Tomorrow's Christmas, and I have to not only make sure we're ready, but also today has been a fucking nightmare." "That's what I want to talk to you about," Kitty said, finally catching up to him. Xavier's tone was dismissive, assuming he knew what she wanted. "You're already in the show." "I need to be the lead," Kitty said, her words stopping him in his tracks. He turned to give her a side-eye look, his expression mixing surprise with skepticism. "Yes, I know Lisa is the lead, but I can actually dance," Kitty continued, her voice gaining confidence as she made her case. She stepped in front of him, forcing him to stop completely. "Xavier, please, I really need the extra money that dancing lead gets you." They stood in front of the women's changing room, the sounds of preparation and conversation filtering through the door. Xavier studied her face, seeing the desperation behind her request. "I'll let you audition on our next rehearsal," he said finally. Kitty immediately threw her arms around him in a grateful hug. "Thank you." Xavier's body went rigid at the contact, clearly uncomfortable with the physical affection. "Okay, that's enough. Remember, sensitive to people touching me." Kitty quickly pulled away, remembering his quirk. "Oh yeah." Xavier adjusted his shirt and picked up the crate again. "Darin's here. He's been asking for you." Kitty instinctively adjusted her chest, preparing herself for work mode. Xavier continued down the hallway as Kitty turned toward the changing room door. A chorus of voices greeted her as she opened the door. "Kitty." The women's changing room was a whirlwind of activity and barely controlled chaos. Half-naked dancers moved around the space in various stages of undress, putting on costumes, applying makeup, and preparing for their shifts. The air was thick with hairspray, perfume, and the nervous energy that came before a busy night. "Hey girls," Kitty called out as she made her way through the room. She headed straight for an open chair tucked into a long table that ran along one wall, dominated by a giant mirror bordered with bright bulbs. The setup looked like something from an old Hollywood movie, all glamour and harsh lighting. She opened her purse and pulled out her makeup supplies, beginning the transformation process by applying blush to her cheeks. Lisa, a woman in her 20s with big curly hair and beautiful dark skin, was already seated next to Kitty. She was also working on her makeup, but her attention seemed divided between her reflection and watching Kitty in the mirror. Her side-eye glance was unmistakable. "Lisa," Kitty said, acknowledging her presence. "Kitty," Lisa replied, her tone neutral but carrying an undercurrent of tension. Kitty continued applying her makeup, trying to keep the conversation light. "So, you ready for the big show on New Year's Eve?" Lisa's reflection in the mirror showed confusion mixed with suspicion. Without saying another word, she gathered her makeup supplies and got up from her chair, clearly wanting distance from whatever conversation Kitty was trying to start. Alex, a woman in her 20s with dirty blonde hair, immediately claimed the vacant seat next to Kitty. She began fixing her mascara while picking up the conversation where Lisa had left it hanging. "Don't worry about her, she's on her period," Alex said casually, as if this explained Lisa's cold behavior. Kitty saw an opportunity and took it. "Xavier is going to let me audition lead for New Year's Eve." Alex's hand paused mid-mascara application. "Really?" "Yeah, I just asked him," Kitty replied, unable to hide her excitement. Alex's expression shifted to something between amusement and concern. Ooh, these bitches are going to be mad. Why? Kitty asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Lisa thinks she runs this joint, and her minions follow her around like high school, Alex explained, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The reality of the situation hit Kitty all at once. Oh fuck, you're right. Alex nodded knowingly. Just be ready for these bitches to sabotage you. After a beat, Alex shifted topics with the casual efficiency of someone used to juggling multiple conversations. Your boyfriend is here. Yeah, I know, poor guy. I feel bad for him, Kitty said, her voice carrying genuine sympathy. Alex looked at her with confusion. Why? You're getting paid? It's not that. He seems innocent, Kitty explained, her reflection showing someone wrestling with guilt. And you seem nice, Alex observed. I am nice, Kitty insisted. That's why he gives you all his money. Zrenia, Alex ответил. Stop it, Kitty said, but without real anger. After a moment of silence, she stood up from her chair. I'ma go work the floor. Alex called after her with the kind of encouragement that served as both support and reminder. Get that money. Bye, Kitty replied, heading toward her locker to finish preparing. As she walked away, Alex continued working on her mascara, but got some in her eye. Ah, my fucking eye, she cursed, blinking rapidly and trying to clear her vision. At the bar, Darin sat patiently on a stool, his appearance marking him as someone who didn't quite belong in this environment. In his early 50s, he was a Caucasian man dressed conservatively in khakis and a striped polo shirt, the kind of outfit that suggested suburban comfort rather than nightlife adventure. He waited quietly for a bartender to notice him, his posture showing the patience of someone accustomed to being overlooked. Wade entered the bar area and positioned himself next to Darin, immediately commanding attention in a way that the older man couldn't. Mixie, Wade called out, waving to get the bartender's attention. Mixie looked up from her bottle arranging and smiled at the familiar face. Hey, baby, what can I get for you? Let me get 2 Heinekens, Wade said, then glanced over at Darin with the casual awareness of someone who noticed everyone around him. You getting something? Wade asked. Darin seemed surprised by the attention, but pleased to be included. Yeah, I'd like a Heineken as well, please. Wade turned back to Mixie without missing a beat. 3 Heinekens, Mixie. You got it, boys, Mixie replied, efficiently pulling 3 bottles from the cooler and setting them on the bar. Wade picked up 2 of the beers, clearly intending to take one elsewhere. Thanks, Darin, he said to the older man, acknowledging the courtesy. Wade disappeared back into the club, leaving Darin alone at the bar. Darin picked up his beer and took a careful sip, then reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill, placing it on the bar with the confidence of someone who assumed it would cover his drink. Mixie placed the receipt in front of him. $39, hun. Darin's face showed surprise as he looked down at his lonely $20 bill. The reality of strip club pricing hit him as he reached back into his wallet and reluctantly pulled out another 20 to cover the tab. At the entrance, the club's atmosphere shifted as Happy made his arrival. He was a man in his 50s who commanded attention wherever he went. Dressed in a powder blue suit that looked expensive despite being slightly flashy, his white dress shirt was left open at the collar, revealing a hairy chest adorned with a heavy gold necklace that caught the light with each movement. A cigar hung from his lips, and his thinning hair was slicked back with what appeared to be expensive pomade. Lolita, a cocktail waitress in her 20s, immediately approached him with the kind of attention reserved for VIP customers. Hey, Happy, she said warmly. Hey, baby, Happy replied, pulling her into a hug and kissing her cheek in a gesture that was both affectionate and possessive. He pressed a $100 bill into her hand with the casual ease of someone for whom money was no object. Right this way, Lolita said, leading him toward a reserved table positioned near the main stage. Prime real estate in the club's geography. I'll have a few bottles sent over, she promised as they reached his table. Thanks, honey, Happy replied, settling into his seat like a king taking his throne. Back in Xavier's office, the club owner sat hunched over order books, a phone pressed to his ear. The stress of the day was evident in his posture and the tension in his voice. This day's just a mess, Xavier said into the phone. The voice on the other end was warm and supportive. "Oh, babe, it'll get better." "It's just one thing after another," Xavier continued, his frustration bleeding through every word. After a pause, he added with genuine longing, "I just want to come home." "If you can, you should. That would make me happy." Christopher's voice carried the kind of understanding that comes from a long relationship. "I know, but I can't," Xavier replied, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. Lolita appeared in his doorway, and Xavier's attention was immediately divided between his personal and professional worlds. "I have to go," he said into the phone. "Okay, I love you. It'll be okay." Christopher's voice offered comfort and reassurance. "I know, love you too. Bye, Christopher," Xavier said. "Bye," came the response before Xavier hung up. "Happy's here," Lolita announced, her tone suggesting this news would complicate Xavier's already difficult day. "Fuck," Xavier muttered, looking at the 2 bottles of expensive cognac sitting on his desk. Presumably the special order that Happy required. Xavier entered the kitchen carrying the 2 bottles, his movements urgent and focused. The familiar chaos of dinner service surrounded him, but his attention was fixed on one particular task. "Bobby, I need the Happy Special ASAP," he called out. Bobby, having composed herself since their earlier encounter, immediately grabbed a T-bone steak and placed it on a sizzling hot cast-iron pan. The meat hit the metal with the violent hiss of high-heat cooking. Xavier watched the preparation with growing concern. "T-bone? Still no fillets?" "Nope," Bobby replied, focusing on the cooking but unable to hide her own frustration with the supply situation. "Fuck!" Xavier's curse carried the weight of a perfectionist, forced to serve second best to an important customer. Out in the main club area, Kitty had settled into her work routine. She sat comfortably on Darin's lap, her fingers playing gently with the hair at the back of his neck, in a gesture that was both intimate and practiced. "Do you have any plans for tomorrow?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine curiosity, mixed with professional interest. "Just coming to see you," Darin replied, his answer revealing the kind of lonely devotion that made him a regular customer. Kitty's expression showed surprise mixed with sympathy. "But it's Christmas. Don't you have anyone special to spend it with?" "Just you, darling," Darin said, his words carrying both sadness and contentment. "Ah," Kitty responded, her sympathy genuine despite the professional nature of their relationship. She took a sip of her drink, using the moment to scan the room as she'd been trained to do. Her eyes caught Xavier emerging from the kitchen, carrying a plate of food in one hand and a bottle of champagne in the other. His gaze found hers immediately across the crowded room. "Kitty," Xavier called out, then nodded toward Happy's table. The signal was clear, and Kitty understood immediately what was expected of her. "I have to go," she said to Darin, standing up and adjusting her dress and posture as she transitioned from one customer to another. Wade, who had been standing at the bar nursing his beer, watched the entire interaction with the keen eye of someone who understood the club's dynamics. As Kitty hurried to follow Xavier's direction, Wade walked over to Darin's table and positioned himself next to it. "Time to go to work," he said, speaking partly to himself and partly to Darin, though the older man probably didn't understand the full meaning of the comment. Wade finished his beer in one long pull, then set the empty bottle on Darin's table. With casual disregard for boundaries, he stretched his arms and shoulders like an athlete preparing for competition, then walked directly toward the VIP area, where a group of what appeared to be gang members had claimed their territory. At Happy's reserved table, the amber glow of the restaurant's overhead lights cast long shadows across the burgundy leather booth, where Happy sat like a king surveying his domain. The air hung thick with the mingled scents of grilled meat, expensive cologne, and the faint haze of cigar smoke that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Xavier approached the table with practiced precision, his crisp white shirt and black vest marking him as one of the establishment's more experienced servers. He set down a gleaming white plate bearing a perfectly charred T-bone steak, the meat still sizzling softly, accompanied by 2 dark bottles of wine that caught the light like liquid obsidian. Lolita, a petite server with quick, efficient movements, followed closely behind with two crystal glasses and polished silverware that clinked softly as she arranged them on the table. Her presence was brief but purposeful, another cog in the well-oiled machine that catered to Happy's every whim. "Where's the fillet?" Happy's voice carried the weight of expectation, tinged with the slight disappointment of a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. Xavier's response came without missing a beat, his tone deferential yet confident. "Chef prepared this beautiful T-bone just for you, Happy. Fillets didn't make it in today." Happy's shoulders lifted in a subtle shrug, his thick fingers drumming once against the table's polished surface. Okay. Pop that bottle for me, would ya?" The cork came free with a satisfying pop that seemed to echo in the intimate space around their booth. Xavier's movements were fluid as he poured the deep red wine into both glasses, the liquid catching the light as it swirled and settled. The rich aroma of the vintage mixed with the savory scents already permeating the air. "Where's Kitty?" Happy's question hung in the air like smoke, his eyes already scanning the room beyond Xavier's shoulder. "She should be right behind me," Xavier replied, his gaze following Happy's expectant stare toward the entrance. As if summoned by their conversation, Kitty appeared in the doorway. Her silhouette was framed by the softer lighting from the hallway beyond, creating an almost ethereal effect as she stepped into the warmer glow of the dining area. Her presence seemed to shift the very atmosphere of the space, drawing eyes and attention like a magnet. "I'm here," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of confidence and careful calculation. Happy's face transformed at the sight of her, his weathered features softening into something approaching genuine pleasure. "Ah, there's my girl." Kitty moved with the fluid grace of someone who understood the power of movement, sliding into the booth next to Happy with practiced ease. He leaned back against the leather upholstery, his posture relaxed but commanding, a smug grin playing at the corners of his mouth. A half-smoked cigar rested between the fingers of his left hand, while his right hand occasionally patted the thick roll of cash that bulged from his jacket pocket like a promise of possibilities. Before him sat the remnants of his meal, the half-eaten steak already beginning to cool on the bone china plate. The faint smell of char and whiskey lingered around him like an invisible cloud, marking his territory in the intimate space. Kitty leaned in with calculated intimacy, her shoulder brushing against his as she pressed her lips to his cheek. The kiss was placed with precision, close enough to his mouth to suggest intimacy but not quite landing on his lips. It was a strategic move, executed with the skill of someone who understood the delicate balance between giving and withholding. Happy's eyes tracked her every movement, his gaze sharp and assessing, even as he appeared relaxed. Xavier cleared his throat softly, drawing their attention back to matters of service. "Mr. Happy, would you care for a bottle of Mucow later on?" Happy's response came without him. Even turning to look at the server, his attention still focused on Kitty's presence beside him. "Yeah, that sounds great." Xavier acknowledged the request with a small professional nod before retreating from their private bubble of conversation, his footsteps barely audible on the thick carpet as he made his way to attend to other patrons. The silence that followed stretched between Happy and Kitty like a taut wire, filled with unspoken expectations and carefully measured intentions. When Kitty finally spoke, her timing was perfect, the pause long enough to build anticipation, but not so long as to create awkwardness. "I heard you were planning a little getaway," she said, her tone casual, but her eyes alert for his reaction. Happy's eyebrow arched with interest as he swirled his wine, the dark liquid creating small whirlpools in the crystal glass. The gesture was both contemplative and performative, a moment of theater that bought him time to formulate his response. "You been asking about me, sweetheart?" The question carried layers of meaning, equal parts flattered and suspicious. Kitty's smile was answer enough before she spoke, her expression warm but controlled. "You're hard to miss, Happy. Word travels? That right?" His voice held a note of amusement, but his eyes remained sharp and calculating. The $100 bill appeared between his fingers as if by magic, crisp and green against the dark wood of the table. He slid it across the surface with deliberate slowness, his fingertips contacting hers as she reached to pick it up. The touch was brief but electric, a test disguised as generosity. She passed, her fingers steady as they closed around the money, neither too eager nor too hesitant. "I was thinking maybe I'd come along," Kitty said, her voice carrying just the right note of suggestion without seeming presumptuous. "That's so." Happy's response was neutral, giving nothing away while inviting her to continue. Her smirk was slight but meaningful, a small display of confidence that suggested she knew exactly what she brought to any equation. "You know I'd keep you entertained." "I don't doubt that." His voice carried the weight of experience, suggesting he'd sampled enough entertainment to be a good judge. "Where's a girl like you want to go?" "Vegas." The single word landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. Happy stopped mid-drink, the glass frozen halfway to his lips as his eyes widened slightly. Whatever destination he'd been expecting, it wasn't that one. "Vegas? Thought you'd say somewhere tropical." His surprise was genuine, breaking through his usual calculated composure. "Nah. Pools, luxury, cards, and drinks. Sounds perfect." Kitty's response was immediate and confident, as if she'd given it considerable thought. "I like the way you think." The approval in his voice was unmistakable, and something shifted in his posture, a subtle relaxation that suggested she'd passed another test. He leaned forward suddenly, closing the distance between them as his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The intimacy was calculated, designed to make their conversation feel like a conspiracy between just the two of them. "Let me ask you something, Kitty. You just want the trip, or you need a little help?" Kitty maintained her composure with the skill of a seasoned poker player, taking a measured sip from her wine glass before responding. The pause gave her time to calibrate her answer, to find the right balance between vulnerability and strength. "I mean, things have been tight. Christmas wiped me out." The admission came with just the right amount of reluctance, as if she were sharing something she'd rather keep private. "Yeah." Happy's encouragement was subtle but clear, inviting her to continue. Her voice dropped even lower, forcing him to lean in closer to hear her clearly. "Rent's past due, landlord's breathing down my neck." His smirk was knowing, the expression of a man who'd heard similar stories before, but wasn't entirely unmoved by this one. "How much?" "Couple grand." The number hung in the air between them, neither small enough to be dismissive, nor large enough to be shocking. Happy's fingers began a slow rhythm against the table's surface, his nails clicking softly against the polished wood as he considered her request. The sound was hypnotic, marking time as he weighed possibilities and calculated outcomes. "Tell you what, you come with me to Vegas, I'll take care of it. Make sure you're comfortable." Kitty's exhale was carefully controlled, relief flickering across her features for just a moment before she regained her composure. Her hand found his arm, her fingers stroking gently along the expensive fabric of his jacket, a gesture that was both grateful and seductive. "You always take such good care of me," she said, her voice warm with what could have been genuine appreciation. "Okay, when?" Happy's question was direct, cutting through the emotional subtext to practical matters. "You tell me." Kitty's response put the power back in his hands, a subtle acknowledgement of who held the cards in their relationship. "Okay, how about next week?" The decisiveness in his voice suggested he'd already been considering the timing. Surprise flickered across Kitty's features, genuine this time, her carefully maintained composure cracking slightly. "Next week?" Happy's grin widened at her reaction, clearly pleased to have caught her off guard. "Oh, you weren't expecting me to say yes, huh?" His stare was direct and searching, probing her reaction for clues about her true intentions. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and barely contained tensions. "Yeah, let's go on New Year's Eve. They have cheap flights if we take the red-eye. This way we can splurge on New Year's Day." The specificity of his plan caught Kitty off guard, and she fell silent, her mind clearly racing to process this sudden shift from theoretical to concrete. Her eyes swept across the room, taking in the familiar chaos of the establishment around them. In the far corner, she spotted Wade engaged in conversation with a group of men she recognized as trouble. The exchange was subtle but unmistakable. Small bags changing hands for folded bills, the ancient dance of commerce in its most basic form. The sight sent a chill down her spine, but she forced herself to turn her attention back to Happy, whose expectant gaze demanded an answer. Well? His impatience was subtle but growing, the silence having stretched beyond comfortable limits. The DJ's voice cut through their intimate bubble like a knife, the announcement echoing from speakers positioned throughout the establishment. Miss Kitty to the stage. Miss Kitty to the stage. The call to duty provided a convenient escape from the intensity of the moment. Kitty rose from the booth with fluid grace, her movements smooth and practiced, despite the emotional whirlwind of the past few minutes. "You got it," she said, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes like candlelight in a draft. Happy's grin was triumphant, the expression of a man who just closed a deal he'd been working toward. "Me and you, Vegas." Her laugh was light but carried undertones of nervousness, like music played in a minor key. "I love the sound of that." "So do I." His satisfaction was evident in every line of his body, from his relaxed posture to the self-satisfied curve of his mouth. Kitty leaned down toward him, her movement calculated to provide just enough of a view to tease without fully delivering. The gesture was performed with the skill of someone who understood the power of suggestion, leaving him wanting more even as she prepared to walk away. Her steps carried renewed purpose as she moved toward the stage, while Happy watched her retreat with obvious appreciation, his wineglass raised in a silent toast to possibilities yet to come. The music began to filter through the sound system, Angie Stone's "Wish I Didn't Miss You," providing a sultry soundtrack to the unfolding drama. The familiar opening notes seemed to transform the atmosphere, shifting the energy from intimate conversation to public performance. Kitty made her way to the DJ booth, where the man behind the turntables looked up at her approach. He was in his mid-30s, African-American, wearing a gold football jersey that caught the colored lights from the stage. His backwards baseball cap gave him a casual, approachable air that contrasted with the intensity of the environment around them. "You, okay?" His concern was genuine, the question of someone who'd watched her navigate these waters before and could read the signs of internal struggle. "Yeah," Kitty replied, though she paused to wipe her forehead with the back of her hand, a gesture that betrayed the nervous energy coursing through her system. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for what was to come, drawing on reserves of strength and professionalism that had carried her through countless similar moments. "You ready?" It wasn't really a question from the DJ, more of a gentle prompt to help her find her center. She nodded, the movement small but definitive, signaling her readiness to step back into her public role. "Well, go on, girl." His encouragement was warm and supportive, the words of someone who understood the courage it took to perform night after night. Kitty's walk toward the stage was a transformation in motion, each step taking her further from the private woman who'd sat in the booth with Happy, and closer to the performer who commanded attention and admiration from the crowd. The stage rose before her like an altar, bathed in colored lights that shifted and swayed with the rhythm of the music. The center pole gleamed under the illumination, a focal point that drew every eye in the room. Kitty approached it with the confidence of someone claiming her rightful territory, her movements already beginning to match the sensual rhythm of Angie Stone's voice. Wade stood at the edge of the bar, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he watched her take the stage. His position gave him a clear view of the performance area while keeping him partially hidden in the shadows that gathered at the room's periphery. The ember of his cigarette glowed red in the dim light, marking his location like a lighthouse beacon. At his table near the front, Darin leaned forward with obvious interest, his attention completely captured by Kitty's presence on stage. His posture was that of a man transfixed, drawn in by the magnetic pull of her performance before it had even truly begun. Kitty positioned herself at the center of the stage, her hands finding the cool metal of the pole as she began to move with deliberate slowness. Each gesture was measured and purposeful, designed to build anticipation rather than satisfy it immediately. The art was in the pacing, the gradual revelation of movement and energy that would keep the audience engaged throughout her performance. The men scattered throughout the room began to respond predictably, pulling crumpled bills from wallets and pockets, laying them along the edge of the stage like offerings at a shrine. Their eyes tracked her every movement, each hoping to catch her attention and earn a moment of personal focus during her routine. Happy emerged from his booth like a man with a mission. His earlier satisfaction now transformed into something more possessive and demonstrative. As he moved through the room, his sharp eyes caught sight of Xavier working the other VIP booths, and what he saw made him pause in his tracks. The bottles Xavier was placing on those distant tables were unmistakable. Pure gold Mukau cognac with distinctive white tops, the kind of premium alcohol reserved for the establishment's highest rollers. These weren't men who threw around $100 bills for attention. These were players in a different league entirely, and Happy recognized the implications immediately. But it was Xavier's other activities that truly caught Happy's attention. As he watched, the server's hand slipped into his pocket, emerging with a small packet that disappeared into another man's palm during what appeared to be a routine handshake. Money changed hands with practiced discretion. The entire transaction completed in seconds with the smooth efficiency of long practice. Armed with this knowledge and his own substantial roll of cash, Happy positioned himself directly beside the stage. He began to throw bills with the enthusiasm of a man making a statement, each note fluttering through the air like green confetti before settling on the stage around Kitty's feet. The sudden shower of money caught Kitty's attention immediately, her practiced eye recognizing both the quantity and the denomination of what was being offered. Her gaze found Wade across the room, and for a moment her excitement about Happy's Vegas offer flickered across her features like lightning. The implications of the trip, the promise of escape from her current circumstances, all of it crystallized in that brief exchange of glances. Wade's reaction was immediate and visceral. He crushed his cigarette with more force than necessary, the ember dying with a harsh hiss as he ground it into the ashtray. His body language shifted from casual observation to coiled tension, like a spring wound too tight and ready to snap. Kitty moved toward Happy with the fluid grace that had made her a favorite among the establishment's clientele. She squatted down to collect the scattered bills, her movements both practical and performative, designed to retrieve her earnings while providing an intimate show for her benefactor. Happy raised the wine bottle to his lips, drinking directly from it in a gesture that was both celebratory and possessive. The expensive vintage seemed to taste even better when consumed while watching his investment perform for him exclusively. His signal was subtle but clear, a gesture that indicated he wanted her to turn around. Kitty complied with professional smoothness, pivoting to present her back to him before bending slightly and beginning to move her hips in a slow, hypnotic rhythm that matched the music's sultry beat. The slap came without warning, Happy's hand connecting with her body in a gesture that was both appreciative and claiming. His grip lingered, fingers pressing into her flesh with the familiarity of ownership, marking his territory in front of the entire room. The sound of breaking glass cut through the music like a gunshot. Wade had brought his fist down on the ashtray with such force that it shattered, sending ceramic shards scattering across the table's surface. Blood began to well from the cuts on his hand, but he seemed oblivious to the pain as rage overwhelmed his senses. He moved toward the stage with the focused intensity of a man who had reached his breaking point, every step carrying the weight of accumulated frustration and jealousy. Xavier spotted the approaching confrontation from across the room, his professional instincts immediately recognizing the signs of trouble. He began moving toward the stage as well, his path calculated to intercept Wade before the situation could escalate. But Xavier was too far away, and Wade's anger had given him speed. He reached Happy first, his hand landing on the older man's shoulder with enough force to spin him around. The punch that followed was fueled by weeks of watching, waiting, and wanting what he couldn't have. Happy's head snapped back from the impact, his body swaying as he fought to maintain his balance. For a moment, it seemed he might fall, but he recovered, with the resilience of a man who'd weathered many storms. When he turned back to face Wade, his eyes held a coldness that spoke of violence barely contained. The wine bottle became a weapon in Happy's hands, swinging through the air in a vicious arc that ended against Wade's skull. The sound of shattering glass mixed with the wet impact of bottle against bone, creating a symphony of violence that seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed. Xavier reached the stage just as the bottle exploded, pushing Wade away from further harm, even as the damage was already done. The DJ's hands moved instinctively to stop the music, the sudden silence creating a vacuum that seemed to suck all other sound from the room. Kitty's hands flew to her mouth in shock, her professional composure finally cracking in the face of such unexpected violence. Wade's hands went to his head, trying to stem the flow of blood that had begun to stream down his face and neck, painting his shirt and spreading crimson stains. Without hesitation, Kitty leaped down from the stage, her bare feet hitting the floor, as she rushed to Wade's side. Her hands replaced his on his wounded head, trying to apply pressure to slow the bleeding while her mind raced to process what had just happened. The entire establishment had come alive with shocked voices and movement, patrons rising from their seats to get a better view of the chaos or to distance themselves from potential further violence. In the midst of it all, Darin remained seated at his table, watching the unfolding drama with the detached interest of someone observing a play rather than participating in real life. The sharp trill of his phone cut through the ambient noise like a blade, the sound seeming impossibly loud in the charged atmosphere. Darin reached into his pocket with deliberate calm, his movements unhurried despite the chaos surrounding him. The word "Mom" appeared on his screen, the mundane reality of the contact's name creating a surreal contrast with the violence he'd just witnessed. He swiped to answer, his voice steady despite everything happening around him. "Ma." His mother's voice came through the speaker, tinny but clear, carrying the familiar weight of maternal concern. "Darin, are you busy?" "No," he replied, the lie coming easily as he continued to watch Kitty ministering to Wade's wounds. "I hear music. Are you out? I hate to be a bother." The guilt in her voice was audible, the reluctance of someone who didn't want to impose, but had no other choice. "Ma, what is it?" Darin's patience was genuine, even as his eyes remained fixed on the scene playing out before him. "I don't feel good. Can you come home?" The request was simple, but loaded with implication, the words of someone who rarely asked for help, but found herself in genuine need. Darin's gaze shifted from the broader chaos to focus specifically on Kitty, who knelt beside Wade with blood on her hands and concern etched across her features. The juxtaposition between his mother's need and the drama unfolding before him created a moment of perfect tension, two worlds colliding in the space between his phone and his eyes.